Okay, so today we're going to learn a little bit about watercolor. Later on, we might go a little more in depth, but just for today, we're going to go over some basics, just how to use watercolor, how to make sure you're getting the full color, and how to mix it with another medium. So you're going to need your paper. You're going to need a paper towel. You're going to need a set of watercolors. These are just the kind that I have in school, but you can get Crayola or any inexpensive brand at Kroger or Walmart. Also, you need a cup of water and at least one brush. So any brush will do. I would work with fairly small brushes. And then we're also going to use Sharpies just for this quick demonstration. So I'm going to scooch this over just a little bit so I can have my paper front and center. So the first thing you want to do with watercolor is actually sort of activate the watercolor with water. So what you have in each of these squares is a little bit of watercolor pigment. And when you add water, it breaks down the pigment to make a paint. So the pigment is just like pure color. It won't do anything by itself. So if you've ever had the experience of watercoloring where it's just a very pale, light color, it might be because you might have added some water to your brush, but you haven't really let water sink into that pigment and start breaking it down. So the more you do that, the more you really let that water sink into the pigment, the more you're going to get a nice bright color. So if I really give this watercolor time to soak, I'm going to have some great colors with my watercolors. To clean off your brushes, you're going to pat your brush against the bottom of your cup. You put a little pressure so you actually bend the bristles both ways. You want to bend bristles this way and then this way in order to get the paint out, and then you're going to wipe it on the paper towel until it's clear. So first I just want you to practice with activating your watercolor by putting a drop of water in each of your colors and then painting it so that you can see what kind of color you're going to get. If you have a very dry brush and you go towards the sides of the paint where water has been allowed to seep in but it's kind of not puddled anymore, you're going to get a little bit of a more solid paint. So what you want to do is balance water to pigment. The more pigment you have, the darker color you have. The more water you have, the paler pigment you have. So keep that in mind when you are painting. If your color is not bright enough, less water on your brush and more pigment. Okay, so that's step one, is activate. I'm just going to write add water to activate. That sounds very Avengers Assemble. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is blending. I just want to show you quickly how to blend. So let's say I want to have a color go from like blue to blue-green. I could paint a little bit of my blue down, wash my brush, get a little green, maybe go the other way, and blend. And so I started off with a lot of green on my brush, and as I moved my brush across the page, less and less green was on my brush. So I had like less amounts of green to mix in with the less amounts of blue. So basically the thinner the areas of each color are, the more they kind of blend together. So you want to kind of play around with how that works. See how I have less green, so that allows for a nice gradation. Now if you don't want to have two colors blending into each other, you just want to have a color that is a different color, like maybe you want a really like a purple that is not the same as this purple, like this purple looks like that. So maybe I want to see what red and blue together make. I could put a little bit of red down and add a little bit of blue right on top and just mix it all together. Sometimes your mixed colors will look different than the colors straight out of the palette. And sometimes you might need this violet or purple, and sometimes you might need this violet or purple. Okay, so that is blending. And this is mixing. And then the last thing I'm going to show is mixed media, which means you're using more than one media. And in this case, I'm just going to use Sharpie. If I were to put down water, just a water-based marker, like a regular Crayola marker, and then watercolor over it, that marker would break down because it's water-based and it would just kind of turn into more watercolor. But Sharpie is a permanent ink, and this is a terrible Sharpie, and it's not going to break down with water. Therefore, you can draw all sorts of designs. You could draw yourself a really cool, like here's a flower. I like drawing flowers sometimes. And now I can watercolor over it. And those lines are still going to be there. So you might experiment with using Sharpie and watercolor together in your design for our upcoming projects when we are using these mixed medias. These are two medias that go together really well. And then I can even add a little bit of blending here to make my flower be a little bit more interesting color. I can also wait until my color is dry. Let's see, has this dried yet? And I can go in and I can draw on top of my watercolor. So those are two media that go really well together. Sharpie on top of dry watercolor or watercolor over Sharpie. So those are just a few things you can do with watercolor. We will definitely revisit watercolor later and explore even more fun techniques with watercolor. But just to know some basics, this is a good way to get started. All right, happy media exploring.